Imagine you're a German soldier in the autumn of 1944. The Allies are pushing hard from the west. Your unit has just overrun an American position. Foxholes, scattered equipment, dead men in olive drab. And there, lying in the mud, is a weapon you've heard about. A weapon your officers warned you about. A weapon that sounds, when it fires, like a machine gun in the hands of a single man. You pick it up. It's heavier than your Carabiner 98K, 9.5 pounds of American steel and walnut. But it's beautiful, sleek, modern, semi-automatic. You find 8 rounds of American .30 caliber ammunition in a fallen soldier's bandolier. You manage somehow to load them into the gun. You fire, the rifle roars, you feel the power of it. And then, a sound unlike anything you've ever heard from a rifle. Ping! A small metal clip launches itself from the top of the open bolt, tumbles through the air and lands on the ground beside your boot. Now the rifle is empty. You look at the bandolier. The remaining rounds are loose, not loaded into any clip. And without the clip, you cannot reload this weapon. Not here, not in the field, not under fire. You have just picked up the most powerful individual infantry weapon of the Second World War, and you cannot use it. That is the story we are telling today. If you love military history, the tactics, the weapons, the men who carried them, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. We bring these stories to you every week. And this one changed the outcome of the war. To understand why the Germans couldn't effectively use the M1 Garand, you first have to understand what made the Garand so extraordinary and so unlike anything else on the battlefield of World War II. In 1936, when the United States Army officially adopted the M1 rifle as its standard infantry weapon, the rest of the world's armies were still fighting with weapons their grandfathers would have recognized. The British had the Enfield, the Germans had the Carabiner 98K, the Japanese had the Type 99 Arisaka, the Soviets had the Mosin Nagant. Every single one of them was a bolt-action rifle, meaning after every shot, a soldier had to manually cycle the bolt with his hand, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round. That action took time. It broke the firing position. It slowed the rate of fire. For a century, that limitation had been accepted as simply the nature of infantry warfare. John Garand changed all of that. Born on New Year's Day 1888, on a farm in Saint-Rémy, Quebec, Canada, Jean Cantius Garand was the son of a large family that moved to Connecticut after his mother died when he was 10 years old. He became a bobbin boy in a textile mill, sweeping floors, learning English, watching machines work. From machines he learned the logic of mechanical systems, how one moving part could trigger another, how energy could be redirected, how complexity could be made reliable. By the time he was a teenager, he had already patented 2 inventions. By the time the First World War ended, he had designed a light machine gun advanced enough to earn him a position at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, the heart of American weapons manufacturing. There, as chief civilian engineer, he was given a mission: create a semi-automatic rifle for the American soldier. It took him 15 years. The Army's requirements were demanding, shifting, and sometimes contradictory. Garand tested design after design, modified prototype after prototype. He tried a .276 caliber model. He was ordered back to .30 caliber. He tried one gas system, then another. The Army tested his designs in the mud at Fort Benning, in the rain, in the cold. Problems were found, fixed, found again. In 1932, he patented what would become the M1. In 1936, it was standardized. In September 1937, the first rifles came off the production line at Springfield Armory. 10 rifles per day to start. The heart of Garand's design was its gas-operated rotating bolt system. When a round was fired, expanding propellant gas was bled from the barrel through a port and channeled rearward, pushing an operating rod that cycled the bolt, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round automatically. The soldier simply pulled the trigger again. No manual bolt action, no interruption, no broken firing position. A trained American infantryman with the M1 Garand could fire 40 to 50 accurate aimed shots per minute at a range of 300 yards. The German soldier with his Carabiner 98K was expected to manage perhaps 15 shots per minute, and that was considered fast. When American troops entered combat in the Philippines in December 1941, the Japanese on the receiving end of Garand fire were astonished. They reported back to their commanders that American soldiers appeared to be equipped with individual machine guns. A single US platoon, armed with Garands and a Browning automatic rifle, could produce the volume of fire that German and Japanese commanders attributed to an entire company. General George S. Patton, a man not given to lavish praise, called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. He was not exaggerating. But the M1 Garand had one feature that set it apart from every other semi-automatic rifle of the war. One feature that made it irreplaceable in American hands and nearly useless in German ones. The En-Bloc clip. To understand the En-Bloc clip, you first need to understand how semi-automatic rifles were typically fed ammunition in the 1930s and 1940s. Most semi-automatic designs, including the German Gewehr 41 and Gewehr 43, and the Soviet SVT-40, used detachable box magazines. You loaded rounds into a magazine, inserted the magazine into the rifle, and when it was empty you removed it and inserted a new one. Simple, familiar, intuitive. John Garand's design was different, deliberately, purposefully different. The Army, in its design requirements, had specifically resisted the use of detachable magazines. Military thinking of that era held that soldiers could not be trusted with detachable magazines. They would lose them, damage them, forget them. The British had actually chained the magazine of the Lee Enfield to the rifle to prevent soldiers from misplacing it. The Army wanted a self-loading rifle that could be fed from the top using a fixed internal magazine. Garand complied, but he took the concept further than anyone else had. He designed what he called the En-Bloc clip. The word en bloc comes from French. It means all at once or as a whole, and that is exactly how this system works. The En-Bloc clip is a small, simple piece of sheet metal, roughly the size of a man's palm. It holds 8 rounds of .30-06 Springfield ammunition in 2 parallel columns of 4 stacked together. When you load the Garand, you don't load the rounds into a magazine and then insert the magazine. You press the clip, rounds and all, directly down into the receiver of the rifle through the open bolt into the internal magazine well. The bolt snaps forward over the loaded clip, chambering the first round automatically. Everything goes in at once, en bloc. When you fire the last round or the 8th round, something remarkable happens. A follower mechanism trips, and the action ejects the entire clip through the open bolt. The empty clip launches out of the top of the rifle with a distinctive metallic sound. The bolt stays open, locked back, ready for a new clip. Reload is fast, brutally fast. Slam a new clip down, the bolt snaps forward, you're back in the fight. The entire sequence takes about 2 seconds for a trained soldier. The En-Bloc clip gave the American rifleman something no other infantryman in the world had. A true semi-automatic rifle that could be reloaded to full capacity in a single motion, without a magazine to fumble with, without a bolt to work by hand. It was a revolution in infantry firepower, but the clip created a problem that no one, not the Army, not John Garand, not the men who carried the rifle, had fully anticipated. The M1 Garand could not be effectively reloaded with loose rounds. Unlike a bolt-action rifle, where a soldier could press individual cartridges into an open magazine from a stripper clip, or even load them one at a time, the Garand required the En-Bloc clip. The clip was not just a loading tool, it was the heart of the feeding system. Without the clip properly seated in the receiver, the Garand simply would not function as a semi-automatic weapon. Technically, a soldier could lock the bolt open and individually insert rounds into the clip while it was still seated in the magazine well. But this required 2 hands, considerable practice, and a level of deliberate attention that was, in the chaos of combat, essentially impossible. Even experienced GIs generally didn't try it. In practice, the American system worked because American logistics worked. En-Bloc clips came preloaded with ammunition, packaged in cloth bandoliers of 6 clips each, 48 rounds, ready to grab, ready to slam home. The clips were treated as disposable. When empty, you dropped them. When the fight was over, you grabbed more from the nearest ammunition point. Supply was the system. The clip only worked inside that system. For a German soldier who had just picked up a captured Garand, none of that system existed. Picture the situation clearly. It is the summer of 1944. Allied forces are pushing through Normandy. German units are under tremendous pressure, suffering supply shortages, fighting retreat after fighting retreat. In the confusion of the front lines, there are moments, brief, desperate moments, when German soldiers encounter abandoned American equipment. An American position is overrun. Scattered across the ground are M1 Garands. There may be a few rounds of 30-06 ammunition nearby, perhaps from a torn bandolier, perhaps from a fallen soldier's pouch, perhaps even a spare En-Bloc clip still loaded. A German soldier picks up the Garand. He has heard of this weapon. He has perhaps felt its effect, seen the volume of fire it produces, the way American squads can suppress an entire German platoon with rifles alone. If he is very lucky, he has an intact loaded clip. He manages to figure out the loading system. It is unusual. The clip goes straight down into the receiver, and he fires. 8 rounds later, the clip pings out, the bolt locks back, and now he has a problem. German standard ammunition was 7.92 by 57mm Mauser, a completely different cartridge than the American 30-06 Springfield. Even if he had German ammunition nearby, it would not chamber in the Garand's barrel. Even if he had loose American 30-06 rounds, he had no clips to load them with. Even if he had spare clips from a fallen American's equipment, the clips were empty, and loading them required tools, time, and a level of familiarity with the system he almost certainly didn't have. The Gewehr 43, the German semi-automatic rifle introduced in 1943, used a 10-round detachable box magazine. It could be topped off with German 5-round stripper clips, while the magazine remained in the rifle. Simple, familiar. It fit neatly into German logistics. The Garand fit into nothing German. It wasn't just the ammunition, it was the entire ecosystem of the weapon. The Garand was designed to be fed from a specific clip, of a specific design, loaded with a specific cartridge, available in specific American supply channels. Remove the weapon from that ecosystem, and it was at best a very heavy, very well-made club. German ordnance manuals from the period documented the M1 Garand. They described its physical characteristics, its ammunition, its basic operation. But documentation is not logistics. Knowing what a weapon is does not mean you can feed it. And even on those rare occasions when a German unit managed to accumulate a supply of captured American 30-06 ammunition, the En-Bloc clip remained the bottleneck. The clips were not interchangeable with any German loading system. They could not be improvised from available materials in the field. A German armorer encountering the Garand for the first time would have had to figure out the loading sequence from scratch, and the rifle offered no obvious mechanism for partial reloading. This was, in a sense, the greatest security feature a weapon could have. Not a lock, not a password, not a complicated mechanism deliberately designed to frustrate the enemy. Just a simple, elegant piece of sheet metal, the En-Bloc clip, inseparable from the logistics system it was designed for. Take the rifle out of American hands, remove it from the American supply chain, and the weapon became, in very short order, inert. There is a famous myth about the Garand that deserves to be addressed here, because it has become, over the decades, almost as well known as the rifle itself. The myth of the ping. The En-Bloc clip, when the last round is fired, ejects from the receiver with a distinctive metallic sound. A crisp, ringing ping. Soldiers have described it. Veterans have written about it. It has become one of the most recognizable sounds associated with the American soldier in World War II. And for decades, the story has circulated that this sound was a serious tactical liability. That when a Garand went ping, enemy soldiers knew the American was out of ammunition and would rush him before he could reload. It makes for a compelling story. And it is, according to every credible study done during and after the war, almost entirely untrue. Consider what the battlefield actually sounded like. In any real engagement, at any real distance, the noise of rifles, machine guns, mortar fire, artillery, shouting men, vehicle engines, and explosions created a wall of sound so dense and chaotic that distinguishing a single ping at any distance greater than a few feet was essentially impossible. The Army investigated the ping concern and concluded that the sound could not be heard or distinguished at tactically meaningful ranges over the ambient noise of combat. Furthermore, consider the tactical situation. A soldier going empty is surrounded by squad mates with loaded weapons. The window between an empty Garand and a reloaded one is approximately 2 seconds for a trained rifleman. For any enemy soldier to hear the ping, identify its source, and close the distance before the American had reloaded, in 2 seconds, he would have to be standing directly beside him. The ping was not a danger, it was a ghost story. What the Garand was a machine of terrible, reliable firepower. The most effective individual infantry weapon on the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. And the En-Bloc clip, for all the criticism it attracted then and now, was a fundamental part of why the weapon was so fast to reload. The story of the M1 Garand's battlefield dominance is told in numbers and in the testimonies of the men who faced it. By the end of the war, approximately 5.4 million M1 Garands had been produced. They were manufactured not only at Springfield Armory, but at Winchester Repeating Arms. Every American infantryman was equipped with one. Every American rifle squad could bring to bear a rate of semi-automatic fire that no other army in the world could match with individual infantry weapons. In Normandy, German officers filed reports noting the extraordinary volume of fire from American infantry positions, volume they attributed initially to heavy machine gun emplacements. They were wrong. It was Rifleman, M1 Rifleman. In the Pacific, Japanese soldiers captured early in the war described their shock at American firepower. They had expected bolt-action rifles, the same technology they carried themselves. Instead, they encountered something that felt, in their words, like being opposed by soldiers with individual machine guns. The Germans, to their credit, understood the lesson. They had been developing semi-automatic rifles of their own, the Gewehr 41 and the later Gewehr 43. But these weapons were produced in limited numbers, issued primarily to NCOs and selected riflemen, and plagued with reliability problems that the Garand never had. The German solution, in the end, was the assault rifle, the Sturmgewehr 44 firing an intermediate cartridge capable of fully automatic fire. It was a different answer to the same question, but the STG-44 came too late, in too few numbers to change the outcome of the war. The Garand was already everywhere. There is one more thing about this rifle, about this story that deserves to be said. John Garand never made a dime from it. 6.5 million rifles produced, sold to the US government, carried by millions of American soldiers, sailors, and Marines across every theater of the war. A weapon that changed the fundamental calculus of infantry combat. A weapon that may, the historians argue about this, but many believe it, may have shortened the war by months. And John Garand, the Canadian-born son of a Quebec farm family, the bobbin boy who became a machinist, who became an engineer, who became the most important individual weapons designer of the 20th century, transferred all the patents to the US government on January 20th, 1936. He received his civil service salary. He received the Meritorious Civilian Service Award in 1941. He received the Medal for Merit in 1944. A bill was introduced in Congress to award him $100,000 in recognition of his contribution. It did not pass. He continued working at Springfield Armory until 1953. He helped develop the M14, which replaced his M1. He died in Springfield, Massachusetts on February 16, 1974, at the age of 86. There is no monument to John Garand on the National Mall in Washington. There is no museum named after him. His name is known mostly to historians, to collectors, to veterans who carried his rifle through mud and blood and fire. But every American soldier who went home from the Second World War, every man who survived a firefight because he could put 8 rounds downrange in the time it took his opponent to cycle a bolt, carried John Garand's genius in his hands. The Garand's dominance outlasted the war. Post-war, the rifle was exported to American allies across the world, to West Germany, to Italy, to Japan, to South Korea, to Greece, to Turkey. The weapon that American soldiers had used to fight Germany and Japan was handed to West Germany and Japan for their own defense in the Cold War. The M1 remained the standard American service rifle through Korea and was not formally replaced until 1958, when the M14, itself a development of the Garand design with a detachable magazine, took its place. Reserve and National Guard units carried it into the 1970s. Even today, the M1 Garand is used by drill teams and honor guards. The Civil Marksmanship Program sells them to American citizens. Collectors treasure them. Shooters take them to ranges on weekend mornings and feel, in the weight of walnut and steel, something of the men who first carried them. And when the last round fires and the bolt locks back, and that small piece of metal sails out of the receiver and falls to the ground, ping, a sound German soldiers heard on 100 battlefields and dreaded. A sound that meant an American was out of ammunition for about 2 seconds. Then the next clip went in, the bolt slammed forward and the fight went on. That is what the Garand was. That is what the En-Bloc clip meant. That is why the greatest rifle of World War II could be picked up by any enemy soldier, and used by almost none of them. Some weapons belong to the men who made them. Some weapons belong to the system that feeds them. Some weapons belong to the nation that built them. The M1 Garand belonged to all three, and no one else could take it away. If this story meant something to you, if you felt the weight of that rifle, the sound of that clip, the debt owed to the men who carried it and the man who designed it, please subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below, tell us what you know, tell us what you remember, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. History is not a list of dates. It is the sound of a clip hitting the dirt in Normandy and a soldier already loading the next one. We will see you next time.